Welcome for those of you who have just joined us. We just had a power-packed last couple of hours with, I'm going to send everybody home with all kinds of stirred up conflict, right? This section is going to be a bit more educational, just kind of straight through with lots of slides and information, but with a Q&A at the end, all right? So feel free to ask your questions. So go ahead and write down on whatever you're taking notes on, 858-775-0500. So send your questions there, and I will answer them as we go. I won't answer them at the first part. I'll answer them at the end. You can also just raise your hand when we get to the Q&A part, all right? So we're going to do, like I said, the dance of desire. So if you'll remember from last year, we covered what does the Bible say about sex, and what are all of the issues around, not all, but what are a bunch of the issues around sexuality. But today we're only going to zero in on one of the issues, which is when there is a difference for a couple between levels of desire for sex. So libido, that kind of a word, when someone has either a low sex drive or they just have differing desires as far as frequency, desire, libido, right? That's what we're going to talk about today. I call it the dance of desire, right? Kind of goes along with the whole idea of the art of intimate marriage, keeping it artistic. So just as a reminder, we're going to have a reminder on sexual functioning. I'm going to just show you the stuff on what the scriptures teach about sexual desire. It's actually some really fun things. And then how do we overcome those challenges? What are the issues that affect it? How do we overcome them? And then how can we understand and meet our spouse's needs? So how do you treat desire, increase desire, and what are some practical things? So just as a reminder, this is from last year. What is a spiritual view of sexuality? If you came to the Redeemed Sexuality class this week, we hit this. Sexuality is a language between us and God that we may know him more fully. So this is out of Ezekiel 16 and 23, where God is using this really explicit sexual language. He's talking to the nation of Israel, and he's confronting them with their idolatry. They're worshiping idols. And he uses sexual language. He's using the language of adultery to talk about idolatry, right? And he uses really explicit language. He says, they were fondling her breasts, and they had a mission like horses. Like, why? Why this explicit sexual language? He's not actually talking about sex. He's talking about Israel worshiping other idols, but he's using sexual language to do it. And I always compare it to, I'm a marriage and family therapist. I work a bit. Couples come to see me because there's been a betrayal or there's been sexual addiction. Something damaging to the relationship has happened, and the pain of that. But then also sometimes their parents were maybe unfaithful, or they see unfaithfulness all around them, and so there's the fear of that. God uses our understanding of that and says, this is how I feel when you worship other idols. So he actually uses the language of sexuality to convey his heart and who he is, which is amazing. So it's not this idea of sex over here, God over here idea. So God literally uses the language of sexuality, and he does this with anything physical, right? The trees cry out, the trees clap their hands, the rocks cry out, the oceans roar, right? And they're showing the awesome majesty of God, right? God literally put himself into the physical body of Jesus. He manifested himself in the physical to show the spiritual. So God does that. He uses the physical to show the spiritual. So he does that with the sexual. He uses the sexual to teach us about himself, to show us who he is, right? Then also out of Romans 1 and 1 Thessalonians 4, where he says they did not retain the gnosko of God, and so they gave themselves over to sexual sin in Romans 1, 1 Thessalonians 4. The heathen who did not know God committed sexual immorality. So our knowing, deeply, intimately knowing of God guards and guides our sexuality. We did a class this morning. It was really fun on knowing God. It's recorded. You can listen to it. How do we deepen our knowing of God so that it guards and guides our sexuality, right? And the reason why that's also important is that's literally the word, gnosko in the New Testament, yada in the Old Testament. They both mean a deep, intimate knowing of God. That's the word that's used to describe sex between Joseph and Mary and Adam and Eve. So God intends marital sexuality not to be about the orgasmic, wonderful response, all those chemicals flooding the body, out-of-body experience. It's awesome. Orgasms feel great. But actually the purpose of sexuality is the deep, intimate knowing. Joseph did not gnosko Mary till she gave birth, right? Till after Jesus was born, right? And Adam yada Eve, and then she conceived, right? So this word, yada and gnosko, is what God uses to describe sex between a married couple. It lets you know what sex is supposed to be like. Now, a lot of married couples, that's not what they're experiencing. That sex isn't about a deep, intimate knowing of each other. That might not be your story, but that's God's intention. And that would be what we would aim for, right? So that's the word to know. And then we're not going to do that today, but we redid 1 Corinthians 7, just kind of talking about some of the problematic teachings that we can have sometimes in Christian fellowships. And then we talked about all the other lovely things that the Bible says about sexuality. The Bible, the majority of scriptures are about what not to do, what is sexual sin, the scriptures on sex. But the scriptures that are about how God intends sex to be are really sex positive. He uses the word honoring, the word intoxicating, burning, reeling, refreshing. He describes it as with water images like fountains and streams. God, literally, the Bible is the only world religion text that has an entire book devoted to sensuality and sexuality. So God is very sex positive, in the realm of how he intends sexuality to be lived out, right? So that's a review of that. We hit today verbal and emotional. Last year we hit relational and spiritual and affectionate, and today we're going to hit sensual and sexual. So we're skipping a bunch, right? If you're just walking in, we're not going to talk about romance, and we're not going to talk about friendship, right? We're just going to go right into sexuality, just to put it in the context, because sometimes it can be like, wait, there's so much more around sexuality, right? And there is. So let's jump in. What are the so you'll notice where the ones on interest is the word that's used for women, and desire is the word that's used for men, which I just think is funny. But this is the DSM diagnosis, so the diagnostic manual that therapists use for sexual problems. Vaginal pain is actually GPPD, genital pelvic pain penetration disorder. I left out a P in there. The one on desire being low for women is called female sexual interest and arousal disorder. Then there's female orgasmic disorder, having problems reaching orgasm or never having an orgasm, or having orgasms that are less potent. Here's the desire disorder for men, male hypoactive. So that means low desire disorder. We tend to think culturally all men want sex all the time. They can have sex at the drop of the hat. But what do we do with the couples where actually he has a low sex drive, he doesn't initiate, she has the higher sex drive, and our culture says the opposite, right? We don't really give a lot of space for the female who's longing for sex, and he has the lower drive. And that's male hypoactive sexual desire disorder, premature ejaculation, erectile dysfunction, the most well-known ones because we have commercials on them, and delayed ejaculation, which means, actually delayed ejaculation is the male orgasmic disorder. So female orgasmic disorder, that third bullet, delayed ejaculation at the end is the male orgasmic disorder. So that means that someone stays erect. During thrusting, they're remaining erect, but they're not reaching orgasm, or they take what feels like a much longer time to reach orgasm. So that's delayed ejaculation. We're not going to hit all of those. We're only going to hit desire today. So we covered all of that last year, and if you go, wait a minute, I didn't hear all that, you can go buy my book. It's all in there, but also feel free to send me an email, and I'll give you resources to learn some more about those others. So just as a reminder, because we're going to talk about this today. This is the female genitalia. This, of course, is just a light-skinned female. And the reason why that's important is that when a female is stimulated, blood flow comes to the tissues. See the labia minora, the first, so there's the bright pink, that's the vestibule. The light pink is the first layer, is the labia minora, the smaller lips, and then you can see the larger lips, right? So when the female is stimulated, blood flow comes to the vulva, and you can see it on a light-skinned female. The skin will change from like a pink to a purple, the blood flow coming in. So a darker-skinned female, it might be harder to see that. But you can still see the erectile response in, for both men, for women. So we tend to think of men have an erection, but actually women do as well. That is this picture, sort of. So this is the clitoris, as a reminder. We did this last year, but just as a reminder, up at the top here, it literally says clitoris, right? That's where it is. But it's not just that little knobby part. It is the knobby part plus the shaft plus the crura, the legs, right? The erectile tissue for the female, men have all of their erectile tissue in the penis. My favorite picture, right? I call it the a la bobbit picture, that right? But it gives you an idea, right? So men have 3 spongy bodies coming through. 2 are the size of like a cigar, and the other is like the size of a pencil. So the corpus cavernosum are the 2 like cigar-shaped ones, and it's got lots of veins. It's spongy material with lots of little teeny veins that the blood flow comes in and causes it to become erect. Same thing with the spongiosum. It's the long, thin, smaller, thin tube. The urethra is coming through that tube. And it's also surrounded by erectile tissue. So when a male becomes erect, those 3 bodies will become filled with blood and cause that erectile response. Well, a female has erectile tissue around her clitoris, around the shaft. So she has a head and a shaft, like a male does, because when a baby is first being formed in the body, they can't actually tell the difference. The genitalia look the same, and then they begin to change, right? He ends up with a penis, she ends up with a clitoris. So they have the same beginnings. So the clitoris has a head and a shaft and a crura, the legs. And the legs have the largest amount of erectile tissue around them. They're called the erectile bulbs. So remember the cigar-shaped and the pencil-shaped for the male? The bulbs around the crura that are underneath the labia. So those crura come down underneath the labia, and they're surrounded by erectile tissue, as is the head and shaft of the clitoris. There's also erectile tissue. Remember, around the males, it's the urethra, the spongiosum, that's the size of a pencil. So a female, see where she urinates from is that little teeny black dot. That's where the urethra comes out. She also has a tube of spongy tissue around the urethra that cushions the urethra, but is also erectile. So if you stimulate erectile tissue, just like in a male, in a female, you stimulate the erectile tissue, you get an erectile response. So the lips will stand up, right? And the erectile tissue around the urethra will, right, expand. That's when you place your fingers into the vagina, the larger black hole, and you press up. You're pressing up against the G spot, right? Which I joked last year, and it's always my joke. It's the Grafenberg spot, which is the name of a male, which is so wrong, right? Wrong. So but why is that stimulating for some women to reach orgasm? Because I get asked that a lot. How, can women have a vaginal orgasm? They can. Why? Because the crura, the legs, are surrounded by erectile tissue, and they're underneath the labia. So the thrusting, vaginal thrusting, creates enough stimulation of that erectile tissue to send a message to the clitoris and lead to orgasm. Sometimes, though, women need direct stimulation to the clitoris, right? Why is this important to female orgasmic response and to desire? Is that some women, so if you'll remember, see how it says female sexual interest and arousal disorder? The arousal disorder is what I just showed you. All of that tissue becoming erect, where females will say, I feel the tingling and throbbing sensation in the vulva, that's arousal. Interest is the thoughts in your mind of, ooh, I'd like to, maybe fantasy, remembering something that happened. Interest sends a message to the genitals and causes some arousal response. We know that a little more clearly with the male response because the penis actually literally stands up. A male's thinking a thought or something brushes against him and his penis goes, ooh, that's nice, and becomes erect. It's harder to tell for women about their erectile response because there's not a penis standing up, right? But that same erectile response is happening if she's aroused and it's causing that tingling and throbbing. The thing is, what they did was, so you'll notice here, well, I'll say it's the fourth bullet is male hypoactive desire disorder. He has low desire. Then the second to last bullet is erectile dysfunction. That's his arousal. That's his erectile response. They kept them separate for men. This is the funniest thing, but they combined them for women. They are two separate things. Interest, which is desire, is one thing. Arousal is a separate thing. People can have interest, they want to, but the arousal response isn't happening, right? For men and women. Or their body's responding. It's become, they might reach an orgasm or they might become erect, but they actually don't think about it a lot, don't really have a lot of an urge or a libido. So they're two separate things, interest and arousal, all right? They overlap a lot, which is why they combined it for women, but I think that's stupid personally. So there we go. That's that review. Definitely menopause, being on the pill, going on acne medications that strip testosterone, having had cancer and going through cancer treatment, age, the female tissues can dry in the 20s, in the 30s, and the 40s, definitely for most women postmenopausal because of the drop in hormones. Hormones go back to like the hormones of a 4-year-old. And it greatly, so everybody, men and women, have all the hormones. So men have estrogen, women have testosterone. So it's not just men have testosterone and women have estrogen, right? It's both. When women's estrogen drops, and when their testosterone drops dramatically, it'll dry up the tissues, especially testosterone. And so hormone replacement therapy for as women age, which is a terrible picture because there's a dead rat in the middle of that picture, but just ignore that. The dryness of the tissues was the point I was trying to make, is a thing. As the body ages, actually for men and women, right? The skin becomes thinner, and so elasticity. The female vagina is a tube that comes down and it has what you call rugae. It's bumpy, right? But actually, as a female loses the hormonal response, that bumpiness flattens because it dries up, right? Which occurs all over the vulva, but I'm describing the vagina right now. When it flattens, then thrusting occurs during sex, and it doesn't have the movement of the bumpy tissue from maybe earlier in life, and so it can cause more pain because there might be more ripping and tearing and burning sensations, right? So very common as women age and dryness happens. People ask, what do you do about that? Which we're not going to necessarily be discussing a ton today. You can go buy Replens. It's an over-the-counter. For some women, that brings about more moisture to the area. Or go on hormone replacement therapy, or use a really good lubricant. Please throw away your KY jelly and go buy something like liquid silk. So there are ways to do medical treatments. Honestly, sometimes the reason why there's not enough lubrication is because couples don't spend enough time, or the husband doesn't spend enough time bringing pleasure to the female body into the female vulva, and so sometimes that can also create dryness where there's just not enough lubrication because there's not enough stimulation. So, all right, so let's start looking at the low desire. That's the focus of our time. Male hypoactive sexual desire disorder is very impacted by, it can be very impacted by medications, by age, by hard work, by being exhausted, or they've just had low desire their whole lives. So I work with men who, when I do a thorough assessment, they'll say, I didn't really fantasize much as a kid. I didn't get into pornography. I didn't really masturbate much. I had a couple partners early on, but when I compare myself to other men, I just wasn't as much as, right? So they might have a history of a lower desire, or the lower desire began later in life, like when they started dealing with different illnesses, or with weight, or with blood flow issues. So when men start having problems with erectile functioning, it can also, those two go together a lot. Erectile dysfunction and low desire are common together, right? I'm not having an erectile response, so it kills the desire levels. Same for women, by the way. If they're not experiencing orgasms, it's going to kill desire levels eventually, right? So same for men. Men can have hypogonadism, so the gonads, the testes literally make less testosterone, and so that can cause low desire. High conflict in marriage. I had a couple where they were on a walk, he was feeling kind of frisky, he's thinking, ooh, and he notices some erectile response. They start having a conflict. She was super anxious and would attack when she was anxious, and he was like, I could literally feel my penis go, ooh, you know? So again, you're talking about arousal, right? But it's sort of about desire. Like those two things can overlap quite a bit, right? So there's a lot that can affect, all of most of the heart medications affect desire levels. Hair loss drugs can affect desire. So medications that you're on, your doctors don't tell you most of the time. If you have depression lowers desire, and so do depression medications. So there's a lot that can affect desire. Female sexual, that's that big old long word that we saw at the beginning. Honestly, I could almost repeat everything I just said. Females will have all of those same issues that will affect low desire. Definitely, if she's not having orgasms, or if sex is painful. So pain kills desire. And then couples keeps having sex. I had a couple I worked with. They were in the church, and she had, she'd been having pain since she was, she could never use a tampon. She'd been having pain her whole life in the vagina, and so she gets married, and it's painful all the time, every single time, but they keep having sex, and so they come, and they're having issues in their sexual relationship, and my input was, you need to stop having intercourse. We need to figure out the pain. She was not comfortable going and seeing a doctor, and she actually had a very treatable condition. But she was just really uncomfortable talking about it with anybody else. She could tell me, but didn't want to tell a doctor. He just kept insisting on sex. She was in horrible pain. Their marriage didn't last. It was really, really problematic. I'm just giving you a few things of why it was problematic. The main thing I'm emphasizing is that sexual pain really kills desire. Actually, men can have sexual pain, by the way, in the penis and the scrotum, during thrusting, during orgasm. So pain, that's why actually GPPPD is not just for women. I put vaginal pain on the slide, but it can also be for men. So during thrusting and during orgasm, they experience pain as well. And pain impacts desire. If I stick my hand on the burner, am I going to want to come back there? No, the brain says stop, right? So if there's pain, that will be an important thing to treat, and sometimes that really then helps with desire levels and orgasmic levels. Again, here's that difference. There's desire and there's arousal, but they combined it for women. So we're going to watch this. Oh, and I don't even know if my sound is hooked up, huh? Okay, just listen really well to my computer, so we'll have to be really quiet. Oh, no, it is there. Hold on.
You can put your mic on it, too.
Well, actually, it's on. I can hear it.
Okay.
Do we have the... Here we go. Oh, I'm afraid to touch anything. I just want to up the sound on this because it is going through, and I can see the arrows, but I don't want to just hit them.
No, I think you can turn the volume on that.
Okay, can you do it so that if it messes up, it won't be my fault?
That's me?
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go. All right. Yep, there we go. Go ahead and up it some more. Thank you. Yay, Mindy.
Come here. What? What are you doing?
I was just thinking that I could sleep in here tonight.
In here? Why? Something wrong with your room? Is it too warm? Because I had that air conditioner completely.
No.
Well, then what?
Oh, Tommy, come on.
Just wanted.
Well, I don't. I'm not feeling well. I had pork for lunch, and I think it's probably best if we just, if I.
That's okay.
I mean,
I'll just go back.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a desire discrepancy. Right? Who's got the higher desire? She does. Again, we culturally say it's men. This can go both directions about what it's like, right, in that moment. But what was it like to watch that scene? Yeah, it's painful. I mean, you could feel her, right? When she kind of leans back against the door when she's still in his room. And then she just kind of goes out the door. And then she comes in her own bedroom and it's just like, right? Differences in desire can create all kinds of painful emotions, right? So I just wanted to start with that. Like this is a difficult one. Oh, and I just went to the wrong place. So let's go to the right place. Okay, so what are we talking about? When we talk about differences in desire, what is desire? Is it attraction? Is it feeling a wanting to have sex? Is it a physiological sensation of arousal? Notice the manuals squished it together. Is it thinking and fantasizing about being with you, being with their partner, someone sexually? Is it just the pull towards the release, the orgasmic response? Is it just the need for closeness and intimacy? Is it the desire to have the orgasm? What word do we use? Is it libido, attraction, drive, lust, urge? What is it? And that's a really, really good question, right? I'm gonna move on from this one. Oh, wait, okay, let's just go back. What is it? Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh, I messed it up. There we go.
Wise men say only fools rush in, but I can't fall in love with
Right? Is that it? That feeling? Right? It's such a goofy commercial. Axe. What is desire, libido, hunger, urge, craving, desire, right? This is what the commercials say it is, right? But what is it biblically? Okay? It's actually all over Song of Songs. Look at the words that are in there. Taking off a robe, wine gently flowing over the lips and teeth, browsing among the flowers, kissing on the mouth, resting between the breasts, flowing springs, eating choice fruits, the hand thrusting through the door. Those are all found there. You can see the erotic imagery all over Song of Songs. This is from the male, the beloved. The beloved, the female. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. Take me away with you. Let the king bring me into his chambers. Clear sexual reference. All night long on my bed, I longed for the one my heart loves. My lover came into his garden and tastes its choice fruits. And I'm going to show you some things that we know that when they're talking garden, they're talking sexuality. Okay? Tell him I am faint with love. Let him spend the night in the villages, and there I will give you my love. That's her language. Here's his. Show me your face. Let me hear your voice. I will go to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of incense. Again, when you read it in context, the garden images are sexual. Come with me, my bride. I will, and this is how we know. So he's in the garden browsing. This is, if you read chapter 7, he's in the garden browsing, and then he says, I will climb the palm tree and take a hold of its fruit. And then right after that, he says that the fruit is her breasts. So if you ever, people ask me all the time, is Song of Solomon about Jesus and the church, or is it about the sexual life of a couple? And I say, yes. Both. This happens a lot with poetic imagery in the Bible, where it can have more than one meaning. It's very clear that God throughout the Bible uses romantic husband and wife imagery to discuss himself. So I think you can legitimately talk about the beauty of God's love for us by looking at Song of Songs. It is clearly sexual. And this is this in chapter 7 really lets you know. I do love the fact that he says, let me hear your voice in case you've got a talkative spouse. There you go. And listen to the whole passage. You are a garden fountain, a well of flowing water streaming down from Lebanon. I actually got to read that in Lebanon, in Beirut. That was kind of fun. Awake, north wind, and come, south wind, blow on my garden. I always joke, is he talking about a blowjob there? I don't know. Or bringing her oral sex. Are we talking, blow on my garden? That's actually, by the way, the female saying, do this to me. So is it her orgasmic response? I don't know. That its fragrance may spread everywhere. Let my beloved come into his garden and taste its choice fruits. Very erotic language. I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride. I have gathered my myrrh and my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I have drunk my wine and my milk. Very erotic, sexual, sensual language, right? This is how the Bible portrays desire. Your stature is like that of the palm. Here we go, the whole, and your breasts like the clusters of fruit. I say, I will climb the palm tree and take hold of its fruit. May your breasts, so that's how we know that the garden is her body. It's him exploring her body, right? Their sexuality. May your breasts be like clusters of grapes on the vine, the fragrance of your breath like apples, and your mouth like the best wine. May the wine go straight to my beloved. Are we talking about the flow of her orgasmic response, which for some women, there will be fluid outflow over his teeth, possibly? I would personally say I think that's what's happening. Other people would be like, that's disgusting, Jennifer. I don't know the answer, but it's a high likelihood. This is a reference. The Bible uses no direct terms about intercourse or even genitals. It uses idioms, right? And so that would match that he's using lots of idioms and poetic language to discuss what's physically happening. This is Proverbs 5, where you get the word, I said intoxication, fire, and arousal earlier. May her breast satisfy you always. May you ever be intoxicated. So it uses this drunk, like, this is so awesome. I'm like reeling around drunk. The word satisfy here is the Hebrew word for ravah, which is to drink one's fill, to be saturated, right? Intoxicated is shagah, to reel around drunk, ravished and raptured, captivated, right? 1 Corinthians 7 uses, don't get married, but okay if you have to. But hey, if you're burning for the woman you're supposed to marry, you better get married. And the word burning there, he says, should occur in the marriage. So he says, go get married. And the word is peru, which is fiery. So that's God's intention. Intoxication, fire, arousal. Song of Songs in chapter 8 says, so all of these show you that God actually writes about desire. He just uses other terms. Burning, intoxication. Song of Songs says, do not wake it, do not arouse it, do not stir it up until they're ready, right? That word being stirred up is God's intention. That was, by the way, the don't stir it up is in Proverbs about, protecting our sexuality. But in Song of Songs, it's literally stir it up, like stir it up. So all of these are allusions to the eroticism, the desire, the fantasies around sexuality, right? So, I just said something a minute ago, the fantasies. Is a disciple supposed to fantasize? No, that's so sinful. Oh, wait a minute. Could you fantasize about your partner? Yes. So, close your eyes. Close your eyes. Picture a time you had with your spouse that was sexually really fun and pleasing, that felt so good, that was so meaningful. Picture what you're doing. Where are you? What are you doing to your spouse? What are they doing to you? Remember that moment. All right, open your eyes. That's fantasizing. And actually, sometimes when people have a low desire, just allowing themselves to go back to those memories, you might have noticed, you might have had a vaginal or a penile response right then. Well, I'm not going to make you raise your hands. But it can happen. So this is how the body works. That's why they overlap a lot. Desire does get overlapped with arousal quite regularly, right? So, what would it mean to fantasize? Sexually enjoyable encounters with your spouse that you replay through your mind. You're picturing doing sexual things that were enjoyable. Sexual pictures of your spouse flashing through your mind. Erotic memories of your spouse. Experience sexual arousal when thinking about your spouse. So that would be an appropriate response in marriage, right? This couple that I said that he was aroused while they were walking and then they kind of got into an argument. He literally said in his mind, because he shared it with me, that he felt the erectile response, and he said, oh, this is so inappropriate. We're just walking and having a good talk. Why would I get aroused right now? Men and women can have all kinds of different, what do I do with arousal, and is it okay to have at other times, right? And how do I steward it? So that would be the class that we did last night on how to steward arousal, but it's appropriate when we're focused on the marital relationship. Now, what does that? What stirs things up? We just looked at being stirred up. You might remember this from last year. What's the difference between what arouses men and women? It can be a little more complicated for the female, right? That's just the truth. That's one of my favorite. I just had to toss it in here. So let's watch this. You're going to have to listen really closely.
The day in Brooklyn was the last day I remember really having a good
We
time.
never have any laughs anymore is the problem.
I've been moody and dissatisfied.
How often do you sleep together?
Do you have sex often?
Hardly yet, but maybe 3 times a week.
Constantly. I'd say 3 times a week.
Right? Hardly ever. 3 times a week. Constantly. 3 times a week. Sometimes it's more the perception and the feeling around frequency that people will say we have desire discrepancies. So I just wanted to point that out, that sometimes we're just discussing how often we have sex. So when we're calling it desire differences, it might just literally be that. So the FSIAD, this is the definition for it, lack of interest. So this is women's low desire. Lack of interest, reduced or, this is literally from the manual, reduced or absent erotic thoughts, lack of initiation or receptivity, meaning she doesn't say, hey, do you wanna? And then if he says, hey, do you wanna, she doesn't necessarily respond with positively. Reduced, now notice the wording here, reduced sexual pleasure during sex. What is that? Is that interest? Or is that arousal? Right? Reduction in sexual sensations during sex. Is that interest or is that arousal? That's arousal, right? But the reduced thoughts and the lack of interest can absolutely impact the fact that it's not actually feeling very good when we do engage. But also if there's not enough eroticism or the right kind of touch or the right moment, and I'm going to show you that, it can affect the sexual sensations, right? So this is the work of Masters and Johnson and Kaplan, where they came up with in the early 70s this what you call the sexual response cycle, that first there's desire, then arousal, then orgasm, then resolution. And they said, this is how it is for everybody. You have desire first, then you start touching each other and arousal gets going, then you have an orgasm. But 50% of the population actually doesn't feel desire first. And yet the professionals have been saying this is how it is. Like literally, every sex therapist is trained in that model. It's accurate for 50% of the population, but it's inaccurate for the other. So this is Bassan's model. She put it out in 2000. She was vilified for it. Now it's a bit more accepted where somebody goes, sure, okay. There's a willingness, right? And then the touching starts and the relationship is in an appropriate context. I'm going to talk about that, meaning things are well between them. The brain and the body starts noticing how pleasant this touching is. Then the person becomes aware of arousal and then desire kicks in. So Bassan called this responsive sexual desire. It may lead to orgasm, it may not, but it might still be very pleasurable. And so there are a lot of non-sexual rewards just by being together, emotional intimacy, well-being, lack of negative effects from avoiding sex. It may give more reasons for saying yes the next time. It may up motivation, or it may start all over. And there's a willingness again. Right? So sometimes for people, when they get rid of the idea that desire has to be first, and then they start focusing on enjoyment, so that's what I do in my work with couples, isn't let's fix your desire levels, it's let's fix your enjoyment. Because if there's more enjoyment, like, wow, that chocolate cake was so yummy, I want some more, right? If there's more enjoyment, it can help desire, or you don't think about the chocolate cake till someone puts it right in front of you, right? And that's not bad. It means you can still have a great time. But this is the key. This is Bassan's work on if there isn't, number one, if there isn't enough stimulation that leads to desire kicking in, that can be a problem. Or if there's not much of what she called the appropriate context, and this is her description of the appropriate context. Healthy sexual functioning and desire needs to include feelings of trust, intimacy, respect, and pleasure, as well as affectionate touch, satisfying communication, and safety in the relationship in order to be vulnerable. This is the focus of the work that I do. Right there. That is the work I do. It doesn't mean that there can't still be erectile functioning problems and differences in desire and orgasmic issues and vaginal pain that all need to get worked through as far as functioning and stuff. But if you don't have these things, the sexual relationship, so if some of these are the issues you're dealing with right now in your marriage, work on those things. Get help with those things. See somebody for those things, right? Go do my book. Okay, so actually, go back to that. It is the most common complaint that women bring up when they come to see their doctors. Mostly women tell their doctors. Doctors don't ask. But if they say something, it's about this. It often arises from feelings that are not specifically sexual. So the low desire she's feeling is not necessarily connected to the actual act of sex. Subjective sexual arousal, when she becomes aware of it, they did a study where they put what you call a plethysmometer, so it measures the blood flow to the vaginal tissues, as women were watching erotic images, and many of them said, nope, it wasn't arousing, but actually the blood flow was coming. So often women aren't aware of their arousal because they don't have a penis that stands up, right? So subjective arousal becoming, where it becomes really obvious, is sometimes a learned piece for women. Also, if there's not a lot of lubrication, or vasocongestion is the blood flow. If there's problems with vasocongestion, it can cause women not to think they're aroused, right? But it also, sometimes people can become aroused. A male can become completely erect even when he doesn't want to have sex. A female can become lubricated even when she doesn't want to have sex. So they're not absolute indicators of interest, right? That's important. And there are a lot of things that can cause low desire, which we've mentioned, including medications. For men, this is so funny. So if you'll remember, let's go back to it. Here we go. 5 points on what describes sexual low desire for her. And this is the male definition for low desire. I'm like, this is just so stupid. Persistently or recurrent deficient or absent sexual fantasies and desire for sexual activity. The cause is marked distress. Actually, it's only one bullet. Distress is on all of the diagnoses. So whatever. The reality is, when I show people the two different, the first one like this, when I show them that, and then I show them the Bassan, it's called the circular model, I say, which one are you? Yes, the majority of the women pick the circular model, about 70%, but 30% of women pick this model. For men, the majority pick this model, but about 20 to 30% of men pick the circular model. They don't think about sex during the day, and they don't feel aroused until things get going. So that would be a male with a lower sex desire. So, all right. A lot can affect it, like I mentioned: fatigue, depression, alcohol, anger, medications. So a lot can affect desire. For older men, because desire and arousal do overlap, they might not feel the, ooh, I want to have sex, until, like a female actually, needing more touch to get aroused. He might need more direct, longer, firmer stimulation in order to get there. So that's just true with age for men and for women. So what affects desire? There are biological things that affect desire. So illness, if you have any issues with chronic renal failure or just any kidney issues, chronic pain, diabetes, hypogonadism, any surgeries, so any kind of illness can affect desire. Medications, so being on an SSRI, depression lowers desire, but so does the medications. Narcotic medications have a big impact on desire. Androgen, so androgen is like testosterone deprivation therapy, which is usually used for most cancers. Or chemotherapy, so anybody going through that kind of treatment. Age, frequency of sex and sexual desire do decrease as age increases for men and for women. So age is definitely part of it. Hormonal changes, both men and women lowering their testosterone. And then honestly, lifestyle stuff, smoking, drinking, and weight gain can all affect desire levels. Look at this list of medications. The desire level is the one, the blue one. Look at the medications for men that affect desire: anti-anxieties, anticonvulsants, antidepressants, antihypertensives, hair loss drugs, heart failure drugs, heartburn drugs, pain relievers of certain kinds, and then definitely diseases. It's basically the same for women with a little bit of difference. So your doctor says go take this and then they don't tell you. And they're supposed to. But hey, there are sexual side effects. And so if you're on an SSRI, maybe switch to Wellbutrin, because an SSRI has sexual side effects, Wellbutrin has less, right? Or you might need to take Viagra in order to become erect. You might need to, by the way, I get asked this all the time. We have Viagra for women. Do we have any for men? Do we have any? Can women take it? They can. The results are kind of meh in the research, but there is a drug that's out there. I literally, okay, this is so funny. I had somebody say to me, "Oh yeah, if there was a drug that would help women with desire, man, we'd all be millionaires." And I started laughing. I'm like, It was approved by the FDA about 6 years ago. It's called flibanserin. They call it the pink pill. I actually work with the guy that was the lead researcher on it. People don't even know about it. It's so funny. It was all over the San Diego Union Tribune for one day. And that's about the last anybody's ever heard about it, if at all. Should we though? Because it's not the same. Viagra you take in the moment. The pink pill, flibanserin, you take every day. Should we take a pill in order to become more interested? The women in the research study, because I saw their interviews, they were like, this was when the pill was they were taking it, and then the research study was finishing, so they were now no longer going to be, and it took 10 years for them to approve it. They had to sue the FDA for bias against women to get them to approve it, because we have all these male drugs and no female drugs. So they finally got it through, and this woman who was in the research study was saying, please, please, please approve this. It's the best thing ever. It's like been so great for my life. For some people, that's a great answer. For other people, they're like, I'm not taking a pill to help my desire. Maybe because it would just be pushing over all the other issues, right, that might be causing the low desire, right? Might be a trauma background or a lack of closeness in the relationship or something else, right? The reality is, though, we do that for male sexual functioning in taking Viagra, when maybe there might be all kinds of reasons behind why the penis is having a hard time with erection. So there's a big debate out there. It's called the medicalization of sexuality. Should we do anything sexually to help with sex? The reality is we are already doing things that affect our sexuality. So, but doctors don't talk about it. All right, what are some of the personal issues that affect desire? Fatigue, worry, depression. If your background in your family was really negative around sexuality, the only time that sex was talked about was don't get pregnant. Right? No birds and bees talk, that taboo, sex is taboo. Any kind of molestation in the background, any sexual abuse, sexual violations can absolutely affect desire for men and women. The men in my research study that had been sexually abused, it affected their erectile functioning. So like it's statistically proven that it can have an impact literally on functioning, let alone on desire levels, right? Body image is one of the big ones. So what you call body self-consciousness while people are touching each other. And if somebody's anxious about what their spouse is thinking, or they're just anxious about their body, or their spouse has said negative things about their body, it can affect desire levels. The negative thoughts you have in your head, they call it the sexual script. You get distracted, you feel guilty, you're like, what is my spouse expecting? You have negative predictions of how it's going to go. You feel resentful. You're doing it out of obligation. That's a big one in religious couples. Doing it out of duty. Disassociation, maybe because of trauma. Fantasizing about someone else. People will come in to see me, and in order to get aroused while I'm with my partner, I fantasize about something else. I fantasize about being with someone else. I had a woman who's same-sex attracted. She'd never been in a relationship, but her attraction was towards women, so she would fantasize about women to get aroused by her husband. She felt guilty about it. She's a disciple, and that's what we focused on in therapy. Or people that have been abused in their background, because the body will respond to abuse memories. Will use those memories to get and they feel ashamed about it, to get aroused with their partner. So people will use all kinds of different things in their mind in order to get desire and arousal, right? It can either make problems or they use it to get excited, right? So lots of personal issues that affect things. There's spiritual issues. If there's sexual sin in the relationship, masturbation and pornography, if there's a lack of knowing God, we started with that. there's a lack of biblical conviction, especially for generosity in the marriage. If there's unrepented sins in the marriage, there's anger that's undealt with. I work with couples, and if he has the stronger desire, this is a common issue. He has the stronger desire, but he's also an angry person. I mean, the impact of that anger on the intimacy is huge, right? So, but it can be both directions. She can be like that couple I shared with you. She was super anxious, and when she got anxious, she would attack, right? And so it affected desire levels. And relationship issues absolutely affect desire. High conflict, unresolved injuries, like if there's been betrayals and it's not been resolved, which is common. Cycles of blame, defensiveness, accusation that aren't necessarily sexual, but are just how conflict goes between them. Maybe you look at your spouse and you're like, I don't like this person. I call them the icks. I look at my spouse and I go, ick, about their character. Have you got them? I bet every single one in this room, there's something about your spouse. You go, ick, right? It happens. It's a thing. But sometimes that ick becomes so strong that it affects people and they don't want to be with their spouse physically. And so for some couples, that's the focus of therapy, is helping them with how they view each other, maybe a criticalness towards one another, maybe a criticism, right, towards each other. Maybe they don't know how to say honestly what they don't like about each other. And so they need to learn how to help each other be more like Jesus, right? So how you feel about your spouse, honestly, the lack of fun together. I said we weren't going to talk about romance, but this is the one bullet in here. The lack of fun, the lack of time together, the lack of laughter can affect desire levels. A couple that's not very affirming, right? It can be hard to want to be together with someone sexually if they're not very positive about you, right? They don't say kind things, right? A lack of affection. The common thing is where couples will say the only time that we touch is when we're in bed ready to have sex, right? Where touch is only associated with sexuality. Then there's societal issues that affect desire. The whole idea of all men want sex, women are less interested in sex. So this idea of this is what a female is like, and this is what a male is like, but what if you have a female who's the one that always wants sex, or a male that's less interested? So our societal views of gender expectations absolutely affect things. I get asked a lot about how much does low attraction, I'm not attracted to my spouse, I never have been, has that affect our sexuality? My spouse doesn't take care of themselves anymore, they've gained weight. My spouse is older. I always use, this comes into my office a lot, I'm no longer attracted to my spouse. And so the question I always bring up is, what exactly is attraction? What are we talking about, right? And how much of a part does it play in sexuality? And the example I always give is Guy and Kathy, or now Guy and Laura Hammond. So I'm friends with actually each of the wives. Guy was married to Kathy. She had a brain tumor, and she died from brain cancer. And tumor, cancer, that's funny, I should know. But anyway, they're just, so I'm sitting with them. He and I were teaching together, and we're sitting down to have lunch, and Kathy's right next to me, and I'm like, I'm a sex therapist, I'm asking. I said, Kathy, so I have a question for you. Your honeymoon, how'd it go? I want to know. And she was like, it went great. I said, it did. So Guy is a same-sex attracted male who lived as in a gay lifestyle for 10 years, became a disciple, in case you don't know his story. And so he married Kathy. She knew he was same-sex attracted when they were dating. He told her. And so she married him knowing that. And so they went on their honeymoon. And now this is years later. They've been married 25 years by that time. When I asked, I said, so how was the honeymoon? She's like, great. And I said, so tell me about it. Why was it great? She was like, because I am good. So we actually laughed about that. I was with her the week before she died, and her daughter was there too. And she said, no, yeah, you can talk about this in front of my daughter. She goes, I have always been sexually confident. That was Kathy's words. And they had a great sex life. Guess what? He was never attracted to her, ever, sexually. So we were in a group with big class, And guys, and somebody asks a question, he goes, okay, let's just bring it up. I'm gonna let you know the question everybody wants to know, which is, hey guy, if you're not attracted to Kathy, how does that work? In other words, does it affect the penis? Can you have intercourse? Can you have an orgasm, right? That's the question. And he said, let me tell you how I view my wife. I view my wife as this long, beautiful rose with a long stem and these lush red petals that just smell so good, and they're beautiful. So I got to talk to him after he gave that analogy, and I was like, I think every husband would like his wife, every wife would like her husband to describe her that way. He told her multiple times a day, every day for their entire marriage, how beautiful she was, right? He found her beautiful. He wasn't sexually attracted to her. They had a very active, very enjoyable sex life. He's now married to Laura, and we have had really explicit conversations, and they're doing great. In case anybody's wondering, but the point I bring up is there isn't a sexual attraction here, and they have a great sex life and a great marriage. So I think we just put, and actually his exact words were, he goes, I just think the whole attraction thing is overrated. So there you go. What is the impact of low desire? When a male has low desire, he doesn't initiate much, or he doesn't respond much when she's trying and wearing negligees, and he's not saying, ooh, let's. Often what a female will do is that she'll say, he must not be attracted to me. He must be getting it somewhere else. Actually, the 3 things that females will say is, he's not attracted to me, he's getting it somewhere else, or he's gay. He's saying she doesn't want me, and they'll both say what's wrong with me and what's wrong with them, that they aren't more. It brings up a lot when there's like my spouse doesn't want, right? That's very, very common. Okay, so what do we do? I'm going to go into the what do we do's, but let me give a caveat. We need to have often healing. Remember that list that Bassan said about responsive desire? About the context of marriage. Often there needs to be a lot of healing before you can work on increasing desire, or at least increasing how a couple works around differences in desire. And so touch your partner's soul before you touch their body. All right? So a lot of healing, learning how to have the marriage that God intends to have, how to have the kind of touch God intends to have, how to have the kind of sensual arousal God intends to have is important. How to have the honoring, how to work through conflict differently, and how to work through those painful things that have been going on in your marriage, right? So, how do we treat sexual desire? We've just done it. I use education as one of the first things. So I actually do the Bassan model, the circular model is one of the first things that I show a couple. And then I say, here's this model and this model, which ones are you? So educating about the whole idea that all men want sex all the time at the drop of a hat. So educating about sexual myths is key. So we've done some of that today. Honestly, one of the biggest things that you work on when there's differences in desire is how's the emotional intimacy going? Right? Is there trust between them? Is there ability to be vulnerable between them? Are they assertive in their overall relationship and sexually? Meaning, is she saying what she needs? Right? Is he telling her how he feels about how conflict goes? Are they vulnerable and assertive with each other? And if there are triggers from past relationships, so not necessarily their relationship, but there might have been painful things that happened in the past. And so sometimes maybe going and getting individual counseling for those triggers coming up in the relationship that affect the emotional intimacy, right? So it can be what's happening in the marriage or even premarital relationships. And then definitely how you treat sexual desire is pay attention to the context. For some people, low desire is because they're older and they don't have an erectile functioning at night, but they wake up erect, right? So it might be the timing where she's exhausted and can't engage at night, but she can engage in the middle of the day. So the timing of the day can affect desire levels. What's the atmosphere? Now, I would say that, first of all, of the overall relationship, but also in the room. Do you do your laundry in your bedroom? Like, don't be doing that. Like, when's the last time you bought new sheets and a new comforter? And yes, spend some money on the bedroom. It should be the most important room in the house. Like, it should be a place of safety between you. Do not have arguments in your bedroom. If you're going to argue, do it somewhere else. In the bathroom, for goodness sake. But don't do it in your bedroom. Keep your bedroom safe. Get rid of your TVs. I'm just going to say it. Put your TVs in the living room and the family room. I know people have them in their bedrooms, but we know from statistics that it affects things, okay? What happened before? How well are you? What's the atmosphere of the relationship that happened right before? Like, did you just have an argument? Some people, when they've just had an argument, are like, ooh, let's have sex now to just resolve everything. And the other one's like, oh no, right? What is the preceding event that can affect desire? The time of life, like age and the time of your relationship. So when I'm doing sexual context, I'm giving room for some people just need more time to get aroused because they're older, right? Also, the sexual context is how's affection through the day. So I'll do lots of exercises around touch and sensual touch. So affectionate touch and sensual touch. Non-genital pleasuring is the number one treatment for sexual desire. It's also used for any problems with orgasm and with erectile functioning. So it's the number one. So it's the number one treatment used. So that would mean that you get in bed, you touch each other, you caress, you massage, you whisper sweet nothings, you laugh, you play, you communicate, touch, 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 and you go to sleep. No sex, no intercourse. If you want to improve, if there's one thing you take away from today's lesson on sexual desire, if you want to improve your sexual relationship, touch each other and go to sleep. That's like, what? Right? It's the number one thing that I work on with couples, and then when I see them after they've finished and they're doing well, and they do follow-ups with me at 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year, it's the number one thing. Dates, and are they touching each other sensually with no sex attached, okay? And actually then genital touching with no sex, no orgasm, no intercourse. Like going ahead and touching breasts and penises and vulvas and go to sleep. What? Why would you ever do that? It will improve your sex life. I'm giving you a very quick idea of that, but it's the number one. Sometimes people need mental health treatment because their depression is killing their energy levels, their self-esteem. Sometimes people need treatment for body image issues. That's one of the biggest things that comes up in the work I do. Changing the antidepressant, working on, the anxious thoughts. So if a male has erectile dysfunction problems and he's like, oh no, 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 like, right, he's watching his sexual functioning. If she's wishing she could reach orgasm and she's feeling it, oh no, like the thoughts going through the mind, the anxieties going through the mind can be a huge part of working with anxiety in the midst of sexual work. And so that's actually referred to, by the way, in the text in the book that I wrote, it has several chapters, like 3/4 of the book is on sexuality. Low desire has its own chapter because it's just such a big piece, right? And so I actually have the links and the stuff for the negative thoughts that go through the mind in there. Honestly, sometimes people just need help with energy levels, like taking a nap or exercising, eating differently, having time without any children hanging on them, having a break after a long work day. So things like that, lifestyle changes, dealing with fatigue can make right, when people go on vacation, like, we have the best sex ever when we're on vacation because we're both not stressed, we're relaxed. So what does that tell you? You need to rest in God more. You should have come to my lesson earlier this morning, right? Working on our resting in God, working on our schedule and how we have no margins, learning how to take naps, how to serve each other so that you can be rested. And honestly, it makes a difference. So I include that in my treatment protocol with the couples I work with. And then, remember I mentioned all the biological issues that can affect desire? Changing medications, getting help with chronic illness, actually pain, surgeries for pain, sexual pain especially, getting help with damage of childbirth. So I went to a training, this was so amazing. this gynecological doctor was talking about, people don't have sex until like 6 or 8 weeks after a baby, and then they end up feeling pain. And she said, actually, now we're realizing that you have to do stretching exercises, even if they're not engaging sexually, using the hands with a lubricant, right, around the vaginal opening. I was like, are you sure? Because isn't there a lot of major difference? Not for everybody, but in pain levels. So why am I mentioning that here? Because that pain piece is going to affect desire levels, even like after childbirth, right? So getting help with the biological factors can be important going on. So we heard, 15, 20 years ago, hormone replacement therapy causes cancer, so stop. All the doctors everywhere stopped women being on hormone replacement therapy. And then when they published the retraction a couple years ago, they didn't put that out all over the papers. They retracted that study. But the doctors who are still trained in it are still saying it. We actually now know that for women with hormone-mediated backgrounds, their family has hormone-mediated breast cancer, yes, hormone replacement therapy probably won't work. But that's only a certain percentage of the female population. Actually, when they stopped doing hormone replacement therapy, women's mortality rates and illness rates went up over the last 20 years. So just important, hormones make a difference. And so ask your doctor. I actually have women who have had cancer, their oncologist, there we go, and their OB, their oncologist said, yep, nope, because actually using localized testosterone can be very helpful to pain, and no testosterone. And then, so the guy I work with advocates, calls the oncologist and says, hey, wait a minute. And the oncologist goes, well, that's true. If we monitor the levels, she'd be fine. Well, why didn't you give her that choice, right? So I saved your life. I'm not going to tell you to help your sexuality, is often what happens. By the way, I work with oncologists, and it's just an issue on helping them be honest, helping them educate around hormones, even for people who've gone through cancer. So getting help with the age-related factors, back problems, blood flow issues, getting help with that can make a huge difference. Cardiovascular issues. If you're having erectile dysfunction, by the way, talk to your doctor, because it's one of the early indicators for heart issues. So ask. And then definitely, one of the treatments is take flubanserin. People ask me all the time, if I go on testosterone, I'm a male with low sexual desire. If I go on testosterone, will that help? The outcomes aren't very high. Most men do feel more motivation on their jobs, in their lives, but it doesn't affect their sexual desire levels or their sexual functioning. But I do have women who have gone on testosterone that literally are like, I want sex all the time. So, and then other women who say, nope, didn't affect anything. So we just don't have enough research to say, and so I'm just answering the question that comes my way, is this testosterone, especially for men, because men's testosterone lowers pretty dramatically, starting in their 30s, by the way, but by their 50s, it's dropping quite a bit. By their 60s and 70s, it's gone down dramatically, men and women. But does testosterone dropping affect desire levels? Yes, that's why hypogonadism, the gonads producing less testosterone, can and often does affect low desire levels. And so that happens with aging. So Viagra works, not for everybody. If you have venous leakage, it doesn't work. What actually, meaning if your veins, Viagra, what it does is it allows the blood vessels to go, woof, to relax, woof, so the blood flow can come in. What it doesn't fix is the vessels that constrict and keep the blood flow in. So if a male has a problem with the chemicals that close those vessels, they have venous leakage. So the Viagra loosens it, bringing the blood in, but it just keeps flowing out because the ones that constrict it to keep it in aren't working. That is venous leakage. And you can find that out by going to a urologist. They'll do a very fun examination, and it will tell you exactly how that's going, and then a male will know, is Viagra going to be helpful? If they have venous leakage, that's not going to be helpful. But a intracavernosal injection which is injecting straight to the penis, can create erection. I have 2 men that right now that are seeing me that use that. I know, everybody just tried to cross their legs. For some people, for some women, Premarin instead of estrogen, meaning it's instead of testosterone, is helpful. So it's just really different per woman what hormones would be helpful to their desire levels. Go off the SSRI, switch medications. There are herbal remedies like Arginmax and Zestra, they just don't have any good research. What are some ways to increase desire? Do those life changes. We just practiced it with fantasizing, right? Schnarch, who is a sex therapist from a certain approach, he always called it open-eyed sex. Like, keep your eyes open. We called it wall socket sex. Keep your eyes open and be erotically attuned. I think the other reason for the open-eyed sex idea is because then you have pictures that you can replay in your mind later. So open your eyes and watch your spouse bring you to orgasm, right? That's why people will sometimes film each other and film themselves, or they'll have sex in front of a mirror so that they can keep those images in their mind. So, and then review it. For some people, that really helps with upping their desire levels. Having more sensual and sexual touch. Honestly, having more orgasms. If you are low in your orgasmic response, getting help with your orgasmic response. Because again, if the chocolate cake tastes good, you want to have it more often, right? So, I don't know why I keep comparing chocolate, but there you go. Change the atmosphere in your bedroom, right? And then one of the big ones with body image is overcoming embarrassment. You know, that whole idea of naked and unashamed. You know, sometimes women feel embarrassed about relaxing enough to have an orgasm because their body flops, their fat wiggles, their body makes weird sounds, they might fart. You know, like that embarrassment around sex can keep people from relaxing enough to enjoy it. Again, I focus on enjoyment. So that whole ability to completely let in enjoyment can be affected. So let's watch it.
What is that supposed to mean?
Nothing. It's just that all men are sure it never happened to them, and most women at one time or another have done it, so you do the math.
You don't think that I can tell a difference?
So they're talking about the fact that she says women fake it, fake orgasms, and he's like, I would know.
Get out of here. Are you okay?
Oh, God.
Excuse the language.
Oh, God. Oh. Oh, God. Oh, yeah, right there. Oh, God. Oh, yes, 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 yes. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Yes. Oh, God. Oh.
I'll have what she's having.
Best line ever! I don't know about you, but sometimes watching her, I know she's like totally goofing around. I get uncomfortable. Sometimes for women, getting that, letting themselves enjoy things that much is embarrassing, uncomfortable, to let themselves be that loose, right? So I show that obviously for the humor of it, but also to kind of say there can be a lot of inhibitions around sex and around talking and about being that expressive around enjoyment for men and for women, especially if you've got kids down the hallway, right? I'm not going to make that much noise.
What was that?
So, all right, how else can you increase desire? Small gestures to tease your spouse. You know, this can just be wear a thong, flash them, and then put your clothes back on and walk out the door, and they have to think about it all day long. You know? Small little comments whispered in the ear, right? Lightly caress theirs in public, where only if they're okay with that, you know, talk about it. But hidden flirtatious sexual touches where nobody can see it and only the two of you know it happened. So this is the whole foot underneath the table kind of thing, right? You're all thinking about it right now as you're sitting at tables. So sending each other emails and texts, then just make sure to erase them, please. Tell your spouse how you're attracted to them and talk about, this is so fun, out of Song of Solomon, their sandaled feet and their arms of gold. So let's look at that. When you look at the, oh, we already did this. This is the biblical example. Hold on. Oh yeah. So working on all of that sensually, right? This is the sensual touch with no sex, right? Working on touch and affection during the day, conflict resolution and playfulness. Sorry, I am repeating myself. Hold on. We're going to get to here. Look at what it says in Song of Solomon. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. So one of the things that comes up with couples is issues with kissing. I can't breathe when we kiss like that, and so we don't kiss. So then they stop kissing altogether. Or I don't like all the saliva. Well, then actually working on that can be really important. So that is the work of a sex therapist, is working through things like that. Different types of kisses, right? That a nibble versus a whole sucking the face off. You know, I mean, there's just different types of kisses. Kisses on different parts of the body. The neck, the wrist, the eyes, the stomach, the buttocks, the small of the back, the shoulder, the chest, the temple, the back of the neck, the thigh. Kissing throughout the day. Having times of making out and putting the hands up the shirt and down the pants and then go about your day, right? So kissing is a significant area of, I'm just going to say treatment, literally, for people that they don't do it in my office when I'm there. You know, I send them home with literally kissing exercises on how to explore kissing. Sometimes you have to work through painful stuff in the background in order to return to kissing. I had a couple where he'd been unfaithful earlier in their marriage. They were 25 years married when they saw me, disciples for about 20 of that. They were Bible talk, actually, you know, city group leaders, you know, awesome couple, grown kids, great relationship. They hadn't been kissing in like years and years. They hadn't ever talked about it. They came because I was doing a research study and it was free therapy for like 3 months. So they were like, cool, let's go. And 25 years before, he'd been unfaithful. She found a little note that he wrote to this woman about her kisses. And it just never kind of got worked through. They didn't even themselves remember why kissing became problematic. It was so meaningful to work through something that had happened 25 years ago and to help them return to a really lovely part of their relationship. That was really fun. That was really fun to witness, you know, to help bring that about. Kissing with no hands. Kissing with hands exploring. Communicating about kissing. What do you like? What do you dislike? How do you feel about kissing in public? How do you feel about the tongue? What length of time? Do you like the mouth open or not? Do you like gentle and tender kisses? Or do you like them really rough? Like, often people haven't talked about it, right? And that kissing has a huge impact on desire levels for some couples. The thing is all this sensual touch, talking about it often doesn't happen because there's such a rush to orgasm. A whole concern about staying erect, wanting to for some people, I just want to get it over with, so let's just move past any kind of touch. And so they get into repetitive routines. There's not a lot of enjoyment. Life's full and busy. Sex just takes so long, so let's just move past all the sensuality. There's a reason why all the other things that help with desire don't happen for couples. We are going to end with a little bit from from here. This is just a reminder, we ended with this last year, but what does your wife need? Learn her, talk to her, romance her, make sets fun. This is all in the last 2 chapters of my book, just as a reminder of what we hit last time. Caress her, resolve conflict, initiate, especially dates, and plan. What does your husband need? So she needs dates, dates, dates. What does your husband need? Okay, we're done for today. He might need a few more things. Admire him, watch him, touch him, tell him what you need, prioritize him, understand him, tantalize him, romance him, and then blow his mind, not just his, yeah, okay? If we always repress or ignore our own needs, we forfeit complete sexual fulfillment. I put this at the end because one of the biggest things that kills desire in marriages is the whole idea of it's just for him. I'm doing it just for him. One of the biggest things is women focusing on their own enjoyment of sexuality. So I want to really end with that piece because that's such a huge factor within our fellowship and within married couples that I work with. So here we go, and let's do a Q&A.